Hello, everyone. My name is Edward Nguyen. Today is Friday, September 4th. Today I have a special guest with me. My original guest could actually not be able to make it. They had a last minute emergency. So I had one of my good friends and colleagues join me here today. I'll let him introduce himself, but for the most part, today will be an interview, one of many. The idea, as mentioned, is to get industry experts, people who have been in the business for quite some time, to help provide their own unique takes, views, perspectives, things that work for their business, how they got in, and how they perceive this business through their own eyes. A lot of their experiences are largely regional, so what works for me may be different than what works for him, may be different than what works for you. So without going on too much further, I will let him introduce himself. Rusty, go and take it away.
Hey guys, I'm Rusty Hunt. I own Next Ridge Games, and we're located in Tampa, Florida. We're actually Tampa's largest independent store. There's another store that's a chain in Florida that is close to us that's about the same size. So I don't want to say I'm just straightly the largest. I've been playing Magic for a long time. I actually don't play anymore because I own a store, and it kind of kills the passion a little bit. But I've been playing. I started playing with Pokemon, got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Was actually first in the nation in Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid. And I got in because I couldn't read actually in third grade. And a teacher just said, like, hey, don't you want to learn how to read? And that really kicked off me being a nerd at the end of the day. Like, I have a passion for that aspect of it. Like, a game store is supposed to be something that's supposed to be fun. And that's what I'm trying to do with my store.
That's awesome. So just a little segment before we get started. I'm currently drinking black coffee, my beverage of choice. There's a tiny bit of almond milk in here. What are you drinking today?
I am chugging energy drinks because I am busy as all hell.
We do appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your day to join us. So, like you had said, so your first foray was you had played Yu-Gi-Oh competitively.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
what?
I was gonna say I never really flipped cards with Yu-Gi-Oh. It was something that I really wasn't super interested in because I was 13 at the time. It's not like I was young. I'm turning actually 30 this month, so it was a little bit ago, and I kind of got into my first experience. I turned 14 the day I turned 14 on my 14th birthday. I started working at a card store actually, um, and that was my birthday present. Basically, was working. So I kind of went from there, and I did the backpack thing for a while. I actually had $25,000 in cards stolen from me in 2014 at Grand Prix, New Jersey, and that really killed it for me. I spent 2 years not touching Magic at all, and then an opportunity came up to own a store with a few other people, and I've transitioned then into being the sole owner of that store now and running it full time.
So let's go back into a bit
Yeah.
more about that. Post your collection getting stolen. We won't talk
Mhm.
about it too much. So what was like? Let's get a little bit more of a timeline between like what was kind of the thought process going in, because I know a lot of people struggle with this, right? A lot of people. This is a fairly common question that I'm sure we all get. A lot of people do kind of teeter on the edge. At what point does it just kind of go from being having collection, being able to sell cards occasionally through eBay or through various online channels to actually running a legitimate business? What was kind of the transition point for you? What was your kind of process that led up to that? What was your train of thought to go
So
from flipping
I'm
cards
going to
to
be a little different than most people, I would say.
sure?
2012, the local store in my area was closing down, and I was potentially going to be opening a store with a few other people. Well, I had a lot of cards. I had about, what I thought was a lot of cards. I want to reiterate because it wasn't that many. I had maybe 20 to $30,000 of retail value of cards. And the idea was that I'd be running the store, working the store 80 hours a week, and I'd bring my inventory in. But I wasn't bringing in cash because I was bringing in a lot of the know-how and a lot of the, muscle at the end of the day, along with inventory. Well, they ended up wanting more cash from my end, and they gave me like a really short deadline of like 2 weeks to come up with $5,000. So I decided not to do that. Like it really turned me off, kind of. And then a month later, I went to Grand Prix, New Jersey, where I had my card stolen. And then 2 years later, I had an opportunity to potentially get into a store that I had loaned money to that hadn't paid me back. And that's kind of how I ended up here. But as far as transitioning, because I've talked to a lot of people about this, you have to make sure that you have a large amount of capital. When people ask, I tell them you really shouldn't be doing it with less than $100,000 because stuff's going to happen. Inventory can always be acquired, but money can't always be acquired at times. So, you don't want to say, oh, well, I have $20,000 and, 50,000 in cards. You're not going to turn around and, you might survive and you should do well. And I hope everybody does with that. But it's a risky business. I mean, game stores close just as much as restaurants. And we know restaurants are super scary to open up. So my rule of thumb is to always be cautious and not turn anybody away from it. Just make sure that you are going in with a place of understanding and that you are running a business. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me anyways, is that this is a business.
I think that's definitely one of the most interesting things. I think most people don't think about it in terms of being able to have enough capital to start. Right, it's great if your binder. It's great if your binder is flush with cards. Right, that's very much kind of the backpack dealer way of thinking. Right, a lot of them think that they do because they have an operation, because they can, they know how to hustle their cards. They know how to do basic sales online or whatever. But realistically, when you're making that transition, you're not paying your bills with cards, right? Like at the end of the day, if you have a large buy that comes in, or you need to be able to pay rent or keep your lights on or pay your employees, having all the assets in the world isn't going to work if you actually can't sell them. And having that amount of liquid capital is really, really key to get your business off the ground.
Yep. And also knowing in general where to cut losses, not just with like opening and closing a store, with you're trying stuff out, because you're going to learn a lot when you open a store. Of course, it doesn't matter if you're still going to learn something new every time. You can't pay your electric bill in cardboard. You can sell your cardboard, of course, and then pay your bill, but you can't just hand, your power company some magic cards and say, hey, thanks for covering my bill. And that's where I think a lot of stores fall short, is that, and a lot of people, just think, oh, I have, all these cards or whatever that are worth all this money. But at the same time, if you have $10,000 in cards and you sell on a platform like TCG Player, you're only going to get 85% of that at the end of the day. And that's before shipping and all your other stuff. Like, there's a lot of costs that go into this. And if you don't know your numbers very well, I always tell people to make sure you double check your math, because your math is what's going to, cover you in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, again, a lot of people don't realize the costs that really come with doing this. It seems on the back end, it seems pretty simple, right? You have cards, you're listing them, you sell them, you ship them out, you get money. But when you really start to break it down and look at the nitty gritty of it, when you start to factor in your costs, right? A lot of store owners that I know, they operate on the assumption that their labor is free, which it's not, right? But it really isn't. What is the minimum wage in Florida?
Minimum wage in Florida is currently like $8.60 or some $8.70 or something. I'm not exactly sure, because I don't pay minimum wage. I don't really like the idea of minimum wage. I try to pay my employees what I can. I mean, I can tell you right now that my payroll is twice my monthly rent, and my monthly rent is about $4,000 a month. Like, my expenses to just operate as a store are $15,000 a month, just to basically keep the lights on and the doors open. And I say that figuratively, because I'm currently closed because of COVID and operating as a warehouse store. But yeah, I mean, it's $15,000 for me to just exist as a business monthly.
Yeah, we'll definitely revisit the pandemic a little bit more in later episodes, since I think that's kind of really at the forefront of kind of the big hump that people are dealing with right now in terms of, logistical issues. But $15,000 a month just to keep your lights open and to keep your doors open and the store.
That doesn't pay me, by the way. That's not counting myself. That's just my employees' payroll. Like, that's payroll, that's rent, utilities. That's all the other stuff. Yeah.
So each month you're starting out $15,000 in the red. You haven't sold a single card. You haven't done a single thing. All this is doing is making sure your employees are in the store and that your store, you're actually able to be open or to actually be able to lease the space that you're using.
Yep.
Right, and that's not factoring in costs for supplies. We talked about this before. TCG Player is a great place to sell, but we see a lot of people trying to cut costs. We know that top loaders are particularly difficult right now to get.
Yeah, I'm actually having trouble finding penny sleeves. Funny enough, top loaders have been semi okay in the last month or so.
Okay, yeah. Just this has certainly been a pinch in terms of availability. A lot of big distributors are they have these on backstock. This is a frequent issue that seems to come up in the retailer community, is that these things that we paid that we didn't think about before, it was relatively easy to cut costs there, right? Most of us were paying towards the floor because we deal in such volume. All of a sudden,
you order by the pallets, and like now you can't get a pallets, and you're out.
Right. You simply can't get them by the pallet, right? Because a lot of these distributors just don't have it in stock. So they're basically forcing everyone to pay less, or to be able to buy less at a time, which means that the cost on them is going up because most of us operate on the bulk discount.
Yep.
Now,
and then you also have shipping. Like sometimes they'll waive shipping if you buy a certain amount, and now they're not. Like shipping on supplies is expensive.
It really is, and I think a lot of people, again, when they're starting, they're just thinking about starting a business, they don't factor in that these top loaders. Like I think I haven't bought them in a while because I think I have quite a few. It looks like I still have quite a few, but from what I understand, top loaders are roughly 3 times as much at like the best possible discount. I think previously I was paying about like 5 to 6 cents per top loader. And I think even in volume at this point, you're looking at like 20 cents a top loader.
It's at the point where I just say, if you have them, send them, and I don't even care about the cost. Like
Right, exactly. And I think that's really one of the key things that people miss. Like I see a lot of sellers that are trying to cut costs, and I think that's very incorrect nowadays. Right, you can't if you think about it being on the receiving end. Most of us don't, right? Because like you had mentioned, you don't play Magic anymore. That's just not in your realm, right? I don't play Magic much anymore either. I just don't have time, unfortunately. Right? But if you think about it from a customer perspective, if you're on the receiving end, would you be happy personally receiving a card that you bought? The value is largely immaterial, but receiving a card that you bought online in a piece of in a penny sleeve that's taped to a piece of cardboard. Right.
yeah, and there's also creative solutions, I will say, that people can do. It depends on how stuff's presented. So that's something like on the customer aspect, that if you present yourself well enough to the customer, because I ordered some cards from a company, I don't remember what it was, but they sent me like a little cat sticker with it, and it didn't have a top letter in it, but it had like this other little stuff, and it was like, you know what, the card wasn't damaged, and this is adorable enough that I'm fine with it.
Yeah, again, like people aren't looking at it from the customer perspective, right? Again, it's like if you can find a way to make that up, then by all means do so, right? But I think a lot of people are just looking at it as, I don't want to spend the extra money on a top loader. I'm just gonna tape it to a piece of cardboard that I will cut out from like a box I received or something. Right? I think when people are cutting corners like that, I think it's really hurting the industry as a whole, right?
Yep,
like
definitely does.
Yeah, because from our perspective, right, this is just the cost of business. Like you had mentioned, like you had literally just said 2 minutes ago, if you have top loaders, ship it, because they're just that hard to find. And I think the minimum standard should be, penny sleeve, top loader.
Team bag.
I use team bags. Not everyone uses team bags, but team bags, it's more environmentally friendly than using tape. So that's why I try to use as little tape as possible.
And it also comes down to like the presentation. We had somebody that we shipped an order to, and they were like, "Hey, my order arrived and the package is soaking wet, but the cards are perfectly fine." And I didn't believe them, honestly. I thought the cards were screwed. Like they were like, "No, seriously, the cards were fine because of the way you packaged it." Like that says something. If that was a $5 order, I saved $5 by buying that. If it was a $500 order, the supplies paid for themselves 10 times over.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that's just a little bit of insight. I'm sure we could go on about like
we could tell packaging we could spend hours on.
Yeah, this is hours on packaging. There's just so much that a lot of stores just I I think even at the retailer level, there are a lot of stores that aren't packaging correctly, and there's multiple steps to that, right? One, they aren't packaging correctly. Two, they probably aren't spending their money the correct way in terms of getting their supplies, right? It's again, it's easy for us because it's something we deal with, right? But one of the hiccups we're dealing with right now is how do we get some of these supplies that we're currently pinched on in terms of
Yeah, packaging is something that you have to consider if you plan to ship orders online at any point in your store before you open your doors, because you will get destroyed on your labor and packaging if you do not do your math right.
Absolutely. And I think that's, again, most of us don't think about it, right? Because we ship so much, but just the amount that we spend, on postage, sending out tracked packages, just the amount we spend on stamps, right? These are costs that really, really add up very quickly. I think just this is probably like one of the most rookie mistakes when people are looking to expand, especially if they go from a brick and mortar only to online, that they aren't properly evaluating in terms of how they can save money and be able to cut corners, but cut corners correctly, right? Because there are definitely ways to cut corners. There are definitely ways that you can trim your costs, but it's just a matter of being able to do it correctly as opposed to trying to screw over the customer by,
You never want to cut costs on the customer aspect. So you always want the customer to get the same experience, and you don't want them to see how you're cutting costs. Obviously, not shipping in a team bag or without a top loader, when you can get them, is cutting costs that they can see, and that's going to lead to a feel bad. So you might send out 10,000 orders without top loaders, and they're all fine. If one of those orders, however, leads to a customer's cards getting damaged and them having a negative experience, that might cost you more long term than those top loaders. Those are risks that you're taking doing these things. And that's something that you got to realize is that, for every person you're, let's just say, rude to, because maybe shipping cards without a top loader is rude to somebody, that's how many people that they're going to tell, or they're not going to be shopping with you in the future because of that negative experience. People will be more vocal about negative experiences than positive experiences every day of the week.
Right, absolutely. I think that's just kind of the nature of how prevalent social media is, how basically everyone has access to some form of communication with someone else online, right? We see this in, Google reviews, right? That's why Yelp is so popular as a place to for people to review restaurants, right? A lot of, especially in Magic, because the demographic that are naturally drawn to Magic Gathering collectibles like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a younger demographic. You have more tech savvy people. These people are certainly going to go out and tweet their experience or share on Facebook or wherever. And a lot of companies have really started to be forced to adapt to that, right? You see even I wouldn't want to say like 2 years ago, most restaurants wouldn't even have a Facebook page, or they may have a Facebook page, but having like a Twitter or an Instagram, that's just something a lot of these smaller businesses wouldn't even think about. And now,
having a website. I mean, with what happens, it's like globally, of course, having a website now is huge because people can access and still buy from you 24 hours of the day. And being available 24 hours of the day, even if you're sleeping, is important to your customers because that person just wants what they want right now. They don't care if you're sleeping.
Right. They may be across the world. They may be browsing. Your name comes up, and you have to be able to show that your average customer experience is a good experience, something that is repeatable and something that they can share with someone else. Because realistically, all we hear, all things that people post about are negative experiences, right? Because if you look at your average Google rating or whatever, you see 5 across the board, but no one's looking at the 5s. People are looking at like the 1s and 2 stars.
Yep.
And inquiring, right? There's actually buttons that
everybody does it.
Right.
Everybody does it.
Just look at the negative reviews. Like why is there a negative review here? Right? And you look at stores on TCG, a lot of the smaller stores that don't seem to care about their reputation, it's really going to come back and bite them, right? Because when you sort by negative, you see that a lot. I imagine the most common experience people have is their order was shipped improperly, the card was damaged in transit, and the store didn't care to deal with it, right?
Yep.
And that's the most common thing. And when we say this is how people cut costs, that way of cutting costs is actually going to hurt you in the long run, and it's going to cost you more money than just paying extra for the top loader and doing it right the first time.
Yep, it's something that like you also have to realize. You mentioned earlier time. So if it takes me 5 minutes to respond to a customer being upset about their order, or it takes, so let's say I can handle 12 of those messages in an hour. Sure, I can probably be quicker, but you want to give it like some type of personal touch. That's something that you're paying somebody for, whether that's yourself by your time or somebody that you're actually paying with money. And that's, let's just say probably $10 at least. Let's just say that you're paying to respond to messages that could be avoided, and then they could be doing other tasks to make you money. Like, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Labor, I think, is something that people are really, really bad at factoring into their costs because
Hmm.
everything does take time to some extent. And one of the people I work with, Michael Caffrey, he's the owner of Tales of Adventure in Pennsylvania. I'm sure you've dealt with him a bunch as well.
Literally was just talking to him.
Exactly. One of the things that I think he has taught me more than anything is that you want to balance any decision you make around labor, because
Hmm.
that is something that is absolutely unavoidable, right? You can't there's nothing you can do. You can tell what your employees to do or even yourself to do that isn't going to cost you time to some extent, right? Even as
Hmm.
something as simple as you know putting a card in an envelope, dropping out the door, right? Most basic tasks, right? But when you look at the amount of time it takes to do that, it's really going to determine whether or not you're making money on order or not. Especially because most of our orders, the majority of our orders are, I want to say sub $10, right?
Yeah,
That's
I will say, if you're working on larger volumes, I list everything basically above 50 cents. So what that means is that we get 100+ orders a day. And if you are looking at that as a cost, how long is it going to take somebody to package those 100 orders? Not counting pulling the cards or any other things maybe, but just to package those orders, it's going to take, anywhere from 2 to 4 hours at the minimum. I mean, if somebody has a quicker system, I would love to hear it, but like, you're looking at 2 to 4 hours for that. That's insane.
yeah, absolutely. I apologize for my phone there.
No, you're good.
Yeah, like these are things that, again, we keep talking about costs, right? It's so important to hammer this home to people because I don't think people really understand how much it costs, right? You haven't even seen the money on the card yet, but you've already had to pay someone to grade the card, to list the card, presumably to put the card away. Stores with small inventory may have a more simple sorting process when they put their cards away, but most stores with larger inventories, putting cards away is a real cost, and that's something that you can't really cut on because if your inventory is disorganized, you're gonna spend more on labor down the line when you're trying to pick the order.
Yeah, if a card's missing, it's going to take way more time than it is to just refund the order almost every time.
Right,
But
right.
you don't want to refund that order because that customer's obviously paid for that good, and that's a negative experience then.
And you're also losing on fees just by doing the refund
Mhm.
itself. All right. So like at minimum, you're out 2.9% on the order plus 30 cents.
Hmm.
Right. Right.
It adds up. Like, I mean, what it comes down to is, we can use booster boxes as an example, honestly, and I don't want to get too deep into the subject because this is a touchy subject for some people. But with booster boxes, I look at it like, how many booster boxes do I have to sell to pay hourly wage for an employee, and at what price point, like, that I'm happy at? So, I'm including factors and wages in there. Um, because that's important. If you don't consider that, like, I could sell a million booster boxes, but if I'm only making a penny per, and it costs an employee an hour per booster box, well, I'm losing a lot of money.
Right.
Like, those things are things you have to always consider.
Yeah. I'm sure. I don't want to delve too deep into it because I think this is we can talk. It's a whole different episode to talk about like MSRP and like how to price
Oh
things.
yeah.
Yeah, like that. I'm sure we'll have you on to discuss some of these more advanced things. The stream for the past couple days, I've been kind of starting out with the basics. I'm not trying to hammer people too hard, mainly because I'm sure there's people who are newer to this that may not be fully familiar with like all the nitty gritty of this. But again, when we talk about costs, traditional retail for anyone who isn't too familiar with business out there, traditional retail dictates that at maximum you want to be paying 55% of your retail value for the cost of a good. So anything that you're selling for $100, you should be paying no more than $55 on.
And when you start looking at turn rate and a bunch of other stuff, because I'm very familiar with this subject too, this industry is not good. When you look at that compared to other stuff, it's weird, honestly. Because booster boxes are not in that realm, as an example. Because people that are listening, I'm sure, are familiar with the price of a booster box on what they pay for a booster box, but not maybe what stores pay. And I won't go deep into that because people pay different, stores pay different numbers.
Right.
So it comes down to, though, that nobody is paying 55% of what they're selling a booster box for if they're selling the box for under $120.
Right, absolutely. And MSRP has gone by the wayside, obviously, but if you a traditional MSRP on a booster box is actually $144.
Yep.
If that is 36 times $4, and I don't think packs are actually $4 anymore, so MSRP actually should be higher than that.
Yeah, if you're looking at the hard numbers on it, it's definitely like 150 or so, I want to say. The problem is that they got rid of MSRP because Watsy's actually was pretty good in the last few years. If you look at their price increases, they were really good actually. And then the last few years, they actually stopped increasing prices as frequently as they were. And that's a business decision on them. But what it comes down to is like opening a game store. You can't just think you're going to sell 100 booster boxes at $100 and make $10,000. That is not the math. If that is your thought, please reach out to me. I don't mind giving some more information on that. But you're not going to make even $1,000 at the end of the day at that number.
Right. Once we factor in all, we keep going back to this, but once you really go back to listing, shipping, the shipping costs on booster boxes are not cheap, right? Once you're paying the fees, once you're paying your labor, you're, like you said, $1,000 would be quite a stretch.
And I can tell you the stores that are shipping large amounts of booster boxes, where they might be getting larger discounts, they're probably still paying more in shipping than they're actually making. I'd be very surprised if somebody was actually making as much as they're paying in shipping, even just from what I know of the industry.
Right. Again, like, I'm sure experiences may vary, but to my understanding, the information that's out there, if the most economic way to ship is via a USPS flat rate priority bubble mailer, and I think it's about
$8, $7.55 to $8.
Yeah, I think so. I think $7.35 is when I saw it last. So, and
I think they've increased the price slightly this year.
I think as a result of everything that's going on, but $7.35. That's if you're selling a booster box for $100. Right, that's 7.5% of whatever you're selling, just going to shipping itself. And that's before any fees have been paid on the product. So enough of that. Let's we could go on for hours about this. I think
there's so much in this industry that it expense to other industries at least.
Right,
that's the good news.
Right. But so this is one question that I've always kind of enjoyed asking people. Mainly because it kind of shows like really how different experiences are, is what do you think has been your most difficult experience as a store owner? Just what has caused you to lose the most sleep, as it were? Because, the nature of being small business, we all lose sleep over something.
So I would say it has to be having partners in my business, honestly. And it's not that like I'm a control freak in that regard. I actually give my employees a ton of control. But having to confirm with somebody else on a decision is the most mind-racking thing in the world, because you have to make sure you present it right. You have to make sure that, like, if they say no, you have something else planned. Like, you're always in a discussion with yourself of what's the best thing to make money, because that's what a business is for, of course. And if you don't end up, maybe the partners say no, and then you turn around and say, okay, well, I guess we're not going to do that thing then. Well, then you find out that it would have made money, and now they're upset because you didn't push hard enough, or like it's the political stuff. Like, that is so miserable that I am so glad I'm a sole owner now. I will never probably go back to owning a percentage of a business with somebody else unless I have controlling majority to make decisions at the very least. I mean, that's just business in general, though. That's not just game stores.
Right. I think that's definitely an interesting perspective, right? Because I don't know kind of like, I'm actually curious kind of what the breakdown is in terms of, in our industry of store owners, of professionals who do this, what percentage people are in there as, as a
Like,
shareholder, as a partial owner, versus people who
mhm.
are, sole proprietors who own the whole business.
Yeah, like I mean, so I think that it's pretty much typical for like businesses in general. Like, I mean, it's easier to get your friends if you guys have binders and some money together than it is to do it all yourself. And it always sounds fun to open a game store with your friends, but it's not. Like it will ruin friendships. I hope it doesn't. I mean, obviously my experience is unique to me, but it it's really hard when you mix friends and work because there's always a monetary thing there. And even if you're all in there to make money, that doesn't mean that you're all going to agree, and that might spoil some friendships. That doesn't mean that like you can't be friendly with people in the industry or do your own thing separately. Like, I mean, I'm much happier working with people like Ed or Caffrey that we were talking about earlier as a business relationship, and still being friends with everybody because there's no hard feelings then. Nobody feels slide because we understand we're all here to make money and be profitable.
Right. Yeah, I think that's like one of the most important things. I think a lot of store owners do make the mistake that, if they aren't, in your case, like partners with their friends or whatever, that they end up hiring their friends, and I think that is
Hmm.
probably one of the worst mistakes as a store owner, as a new business, that people do make.
Yep, it's hard to fire a friend.
It really is hard to fire a friend. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, right? Especially, the longer if you had a friend for a long time, right? This is, like you mentioned, this is a surefire way to just break friendships over it.
Hmm.
And I think just kind of the nature, we have a lot of people. You had mentioned that you're 30, right? I'm 31,
Yep.
right? You have, and how long have you owned Next Ridge Games, or how long have you
I
been involved? I guess, when was your
So I've been
first?
involved since March 2016, and then 2 years after that, in March 2018. It was like the end of March 2016, like the 24th or so, like the last week, and then near the end of March 2018, I became sole owner. So I've been 2.5 years now sole owner for this. I'll be honest, I don't have a life outside of the store. Like I do not do anything else for the most part besides work on my business or sleep. I'm in a relationship, but like my business comes first. I mean, I've been in this relationship with her for 8 years now or something like that. I don't know the exact time because my business is more important to me on numbers and knowing that stuff than it is that because, you know, um, there's sacrifices. Like I know owning a business has been sacrifices, and that's also part of it. Like you can't expect to just sit down and play F&M with your friends when they come into your store. You can't just expect to play games all the time. I love to sit down and play board games now. I don't get time to do it really. Like that's a big thing. You have to realize that when opening a business of any kind that you are making sacrifices, and to really embrace that, you have to be willing to, because otherwise you're going to be miserable and your business will suffer, and then you're not going to succeed as well. You don't have to give up everything, and I don't think anybody should, but you have to be willing to give up some stuff when you open a store, especially some stores where you become friends with people because they are in your store so much, or you get to know people personally because they are so active with your life also because you are at your business. It's not like it's a store where people come in, buy product, and leave. They normally hang out and chat, like, or they play games in your store for 6 hours a day.
Yeah, and I think like part of the issue that a lot of store owners do have is that they've probably entrenched themselves a little bit too much into that social circle, and they're not
Hmm.
distancing themselves enough away and looking at it in terms of, I'm the business owner, I'm in charge. It's great that we can play games whenever we have a chance, right? But the business has to come first. You have to be able to think rationally, right? Like, too often we hear about like the friend discount, right? That's not something
Hmm.
that really should apply, right? In theory, a customer should be a customer, right? You can't really be giving someone, you know,
Your friend shouldn't ask for discounts.
right. That's
So your friend shouldn't ask for discounts because that's not what a friend does. at the end of the day, that's something that's important, I think. Like, if you're spending a lot of money, maybe, yeah, I'll give you a discount. But if you're just a friend and you just ask for something cheaper, or you ask for more money on a buy or something, like, you're not taking me into consideration. And that sucks. Like, this is what I do for a livelihood. Like, I don't go into their place of work and go, hey, can I get this for cheaper?
Right, exactly. And I think, again, most people don't, make a distinct enough line, right? Like where, right? Like people have to be able to leave their friendship at the door, right? And then treat this as, right? Because again, from a customer perspective, your goal is to be fair to everyone, right? Like,
Yep.
right. I want to tell people that if they're coming to me to sell cards or to transact with me, I'm paying them the most money that I can. And when I sell them something, I'm giving them the best possible price that works for my business.
Yep.
And it shouldn't matter if this is your first time coming in the store and you're a new player, or you deal with us a ton and you spend a lot of money with us. Granted, you may get a bulk discount price for spending a ton, right? But in terms of treating you, I should be treating both those people the same way.
Yep.
And that's really something that I think is, I don't want to say it's hard to grasp, right? But when we look at it in terms of most other industries, right? Like a lot of things that, for whatever reason, have just kind of permeated into game store culture or the hobby industry, right? We don't see, you don't walk to like a Home Depot and say like, I'm going to buy like 10 things of paint versus one thing. Am I getting a discount on this? That's not how.
If it's not posted, they laugh at you. Like,
right. Then that's not how retail works. But for some reason, we seem to think that these actions are acceptable in the industry.
And something else on like because I assume it's not just people that want to open stores that might be listening to this. As a consumer, something else to keep in mind too is that these are businesses, and not to say that it's rude to maybe like ask, but you also have to realize that asking for a discount on stuff is the same as us asking you for money out of your pocket, because that's what you're asking. And if you're a friend or you're somebody that I see on a weekly basis, I'm gonna kind of feel bad saying no to giving you a discount. But if I don't say no, you're taking money out of my pocket, and that's the biggest takeaway, is that this is a business. I know if I have a friend, guy's wealthy, retired. Basically, he opened a game store because he wanted to, and he closed it shortly afterwards and messaged me, and he's like, yeah, I don't know why the hell I ever did that. It was way more work than I thought, and it wasn't fun, because of the fact that like he wanted it to be fun, and for him, money's not the issue. So it was just purely what could he do, and it gives you kind of an insight that like you realize that like I mean, Ed, let me ask you a question actually then. Have you been offered any opportunities outside of Magic, making more than you would make in Magic?
I have, yes, absolutely.
And I'm sure, I would assume you've turned them down.
Yeah, for the most part. A lot of them were just kind of out of interest. I'm not actively looking, right? I enjoy the lifestyle that this gives me, right? I enjoy being my own boss.
Of course, yeah. There's obviously benefits, but like as far as as an example, like you could be making more money doing something else, and at the same time, it's the same way with me. Is I could be probably making more money doing something else, and I've turned down some opportunities. There's actually a good book that Caffrey actually sent me. Randomly, I got 2 books in the mail to my store, and I was like, "Who sent me this book?" And it's Friendly Local Game Store. Your guide to but your guide to a middle class income.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a 140-page book. It's super small. It's definitely worth the read for anybody opening a store. Like, this is a must read.
Absolutely.
Because it gives a lot of insight, and it's one of those things where, like you said, you've turned down opportunities because reasons, and I've turned down opportunities probably for the same reasons. Honestly, I like doing what I'm doing. I feel this is not as stressful. Like, I get to be my own boss, kind of. I get to wake up at noon if I want, for the most part. But at the same time, like, can I do this forever? Probably. But if I can do something where I make 10 times as much money, well, then I can do whatever I want forever.
Yeah, I think like I didn't mean to cut you off there, but just
you're good.
Like the book, the book itself is like you said, a must read for anyone who is even considering taking the next step. I will actually post a link for it on Amazon for anyone who wants to buy it. I'm not getting cut back on this, by the way. I just think legitimately not enough people read this book. For whatever reason, it's not. For some reason, there not enough people know about this book, and I think like a lot. If more game store owners read this book prior to opening, we'd probably see a lot less game stores out there.
We also see a lot less stores close.
We would see a lot less stores close as well. And I think that's like you had mentioned, in the case example with your friend, right? Like if you're running a business, you have to treat it like a business. If your goal is to just basically create, a clubhouse for you to play with your friends and be able to, get product for cheaper, that's fine, right? So there are plenty of people who are happy with that, and they just pay themselves enough to get by. But you will never be a successful business, and your business will not ever grow beyond kind of that last step, right? Because
and also realize what you're doing to your area, your local area of players and community too. So that's something to keep in mind, honestly. If you say that you're doing it because you want to have a place to play and the other store in the town sucks, I mean, because we hear this all the time, right? Like, this other store sucks, they're selling product too high, etc. Whatever reason ends up being. And you want to just open, a store, like, you have to realize that the store's probably doing what they're doing for a reason. And all you're going to do is, if you end up closing down in a few months, a year or two, is hurt, future endeavor, like people opening stores or that store in your area. People don't consider that. Like, they just kind of think, I just want to open up, my own store and have fun. You have to realize that this is an ecosystem. I'm also in Tampa, where there's a ton of competitive stores. I have 13 or 14 stores within like a 30-minute drive of me. So, I'm coming more from that position.
Right, absolutely. I think if you live in a relatively urban area, you're probably going to face fairly steep competition just across the board. That's just kind of the reality of this. I think a lot of people, again, without reading the book, a lot of people seem to make the mistake that they think this is easy, this is something that's accessible, right? Like, you said you had started this when you were 26, right? A lot of people are probably younger. They probably don't have the life experiences. They probably don't have the business acumen. They probably don't have, just the general know-how to properly run a small business. And I think that's why you see so much downward pressure on stores when they just I think the best way to put it is that the odds are really against you in order to be able to open up a successful store.
Most businesses expect to be in the red for 3 to 5 years.
Right.
That means red means not making money. That means losing money. It doesn't just mean that they're breaking even. No, that means losing money.
Right.
That's kind of why at the beginning I said $100,000. Like, it sounds like a lot of money, but as a store, it's not. Like, you can do a lot of money in sales, but if your profits are minimal, it doesn't matter. You could do billions of dollars of revenue. For example, let's take Uber. Uber is a huge company. They have not made a penny. They have not made an actual penny on their company.
Yep. Yeah, that's.
I mean, it's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, if you actually look at like the quarterly reports from the shareholders or whatever, like so much of their costs is logistical and operational, right? Their operational costs are very, very high. I imagine that they probably have a massive amount set aside for liability as well. We see how many countries that they have issues with. Uber is actually a very interesting case study in terms of, the product they offer, what in terms of like the structure they have as a business.
Yep. You also have to realize that they have a ton of investors because of what they're trying to do. As a game store, you're not going to get investors. Right. You're not going to have an out. That's something that I think I should touch on. That's important. Opening a game store, do not expect to sell your game store to somebody. It's not going to happen for a reasonable number because nobody wants to buy a game store for what they're actually worth. If you have $1 million in inventory and you have a business that is doing, let's just say you're doing $100,000 a month, okay, in your game store, and everything is turnkey, which means that the owner doesn't have to do anything. That's at all. And you're doing, like I said, $100,000 a month or whatever. You have $1 million in inventory. Somebody's buying your business for what your inventory value is worth at cost, not at what you value it at that $1 million. They don't care that you're doing $100,000 a month in sales, and maybe even if they're profiting $10,000 to $20,000 of that is profit for the owner themselves. They don't care because it's such a hard industry to be in. It's not like other businesses where your out is, okay, well, my company's doing $1 million or has $1 million in inventory. We're doing 1.2 million a year. So we can say the company valuation is $6 million. Inventory costs is another, we'll throw that in because you're paying us a larger cash, you're paying us all cash up front. That doesn't happen in game stores. Like, if anything, your inventory value is bought at $250,000 and your store closes because you have to sell sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the example that you use, a store that is turnkey and does $100,000 a month is well above your average game store. That is
Yep.
In probably what we would consider to be like a truly successful game store if they've gone to a point.
I would say that there are less than 1% very easily. I'm comfortable saying that number. I would say that there are less than 30 stores in the United States tops. Probably I want to say 20. If I was a betting man, I'd probably say 20. But since I'm being cautious and trying to be, as open as possible, I would say 30 stores that even are close to meeting that requirement, and they're not turnkey. The owner still works.
Right.
If we're talking turnkey, I guarantee you it's less than 10 stores that are truly turnkey.
Absolutely. And we're talking like the true giants in the industry here. Right, we're
Star City Games would be an example, maybe.
Right. Card Kingdom would be one, right?
Yeah.
Like, these are people.
Card Kingdom's not actually. They're very active in their business by choice. So it might be turnkey, but they are very active in their business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
But that's obviously like minor differences. Like, they could probably step away if they wanted to. Star City Games would maybe be one. I know Chetty's very active in Channel Fireball still. And these are the big players in this industry.
Chetty is TCG. Did you mean TCG player or?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
John.
John. Yeah. I'm sorry. I met them both at the same night. I also was intoxicated at Gamma that night. So, TCG player. I know he's active in decision making. But yeah, with John at Channel Fireball, he's still making decisions too actively. He's not just walking away from the business in that regard. Mm-hmm. And somebody would still offer him, if somebody was buying out, let's just say Channel Fireball, they'd value it based off of inventory.
Right.
Like, they wouldn't value it off of what they've done, because that's not how this industry operates, which is so weird because every other industry is a little bit more provable because the owner's normally not as involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, there's just so much. I think the topic of selling your game store is like a very interesting out that, like, I don't think enough people realize as well, right? Because I think a lot of people, they have the problem that they're a little bit too deep in it, as it were,
yep.
right? And they just don't have a good way to get out. And even when they get to that point, right, what they expect of being able to get out is just not the reality of what it actually is.
And that's a large part of it, is that, like, these are things you have to consider. Like, for me, what is my goal? My goal is to turn my business turnkey so I can do something else. That's hard. It is very hard to do. Absolutely. Because you're still going to be needed for 10 or 20 hours a week to take care of stuff, even if it's turnkey at the end of the day, because it's a game store. Are you going to have an employee that has access to, $1 million in capital to buy collections and trust that that's never going to be an issue? I mean, you're still probably spending some time approving some things. If you're approached by your employees and your staff saying, hey, we want to do this thing, we need this money, you're probably involved in the decision-making because it's expanding the business. You don't really get to be a mega giant, I would say, in game stores. So, when I do these discussions and talk about people like this, I keep it in I want to open a game store for fun and to make enough money to live off of, not to become the next, owner of Amazon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not even Star City, because he does other stuff.
Right.
Like, that's the thing that, I mean, are they wealthy? It depends on your definition, I would say. I'm sure they're well off, but they can't walk away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Again, this is another one of those topics that we can probably talk for hours on, but let's move on a little bit. Let's kind of look at your experiences. What does this year look like for you specifically? Kind of, the last time you and I talked was in Gamma, right? Prior to this, but we've gone through a lot, right? Obviously, pandemic, right? That's kind of the big issue here. So what has it kind of done for your business, and how have you kind of changed strategies?
So a lot of it for me, I've changed strategies a lot. I've become a lot more active on selling, um, more personal on stuff, and I've been just leveraging like my time better. So having a game store, you're going to get distracted by customers a lot, even if you try not to. I'm at this point where I'm currently still closed because of what's going on pandemic wise, and I plan to stay closed. But even when I do open up, whenever that point ends up being, 3 months, or whatever in the future, maybe next month if something changes miraculously, probably next year. I'm not planning to be at my store anymore, so I don't get distracted and I can actually work on my business. So there's a big difference between working in and working on your business. Um, I'm trying to work on my business now, not in my business, meaning I don't want to touch cards. I don't want to touch magic cards if I can avoid it, as I have cards in my hand while we're talking right now. Um, but I'm also shuffling them because, that's how magic players are. So what it comes down to though is the it's really hard to say because it's kind of emotional on this stuff, is that like I want to step away. I know I'll never be able to truly step away from what I'm doing, but it also comes down to the aspect of what can be done, because everything is changing right now so quickly in this industry. Magic has been hitting new heights. There's so much going on in this industry, like pandemic wise, that's cause of it. And we've seen more new players get in the game in the last 6 months than we have in the last 2 years almost. It's incredible. So, I'm doing whatever I can to be profitable so I can still pay my employees, grow my business. Um, but it's hard. Like, it is really hard. That's the easiest way I can put it.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has certainly put a lot of like a pretty big crimp in people's plans. Obviously, this year
Hmm.
hasn't played out as much as as we wanted to. I think a lot of stores, in my experience, I've been speaking with a lot of people were kind of projecting a big kind of growth spurt in their store.
Hmm.
Make taking that next step, whatever that means. But it's definitely been really hard. I think anyone who's out there looking in, like we're like the position that a lot of store owners in, it's not an enviable position. It's
It's
definitely
stressful.
it's very very
It
stressful. It's definitely tough.
like I sometimes there are days that I just literally want to crawl into a hole and not respond or deal with anything at all,
Right.
because it's just there's just so much going on. I mean, especially when you have staff members, that adds a whole new level, because that's somebody's livelihood we're talking about, not just your own that you're risking, but you're also risking somebody else's technically. And I think a lot of store owners, that do have staff understand that, and even that people that don't understand that with their communities. But I mean, I'm doing well, honestly. I would say my store is actually growing because I've been able to take that time to not work on my business by, like I said, trying to sell more, trying to buy more. Something that's weird actually is that it's actually really hard to buy cards right now, like insanely difficult, no matter what you do, because people just aren't looking to sell, I would say.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously it depends on what type, like maybe if you're in like alpha beta stuff, maybe those people are selling great. I'm not in alpha beta heavily. Maybe if you're into, just standard, those people are burning stuff out. I try to do a swath of things. I'll buy anything is my motto, but I'm not pinpointed on one part of the industry within the industry. So for me, I'm just trying to buy anything that comes to my door, and I cannot buy enough. I can sell everything, which is insane. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, it's insane to me because we have everything going on. But, like we said, most owners are expecting a large growth in the industry when everything kind of settles down and we're able to actually open again.
Yeah, like I think that reality may be a little bit far off, and so I
Hmm.
think like you're really between like a rock and a hard place right now, right? Because from my understanding, a lot of stores, it's similar boat to yours. You don't you said you don't have the store open at all
Correct.
for the public, right? It's just people are coming,
Hmm.
your people are coming in as
Curbside.
yeah,
Yep.
curbside, and then your staff is mostly doing online fulfillment,
Yep.
right?
That's all it
So
is.
a lot of stores, I imagine, probably pretty similar boat, right? The ones that are concerned about keeping their employees safe. I think that's something that as a business owner, that's absolutely the correct decision to do, right? You want to be minimizing the risk of your staff. You have to be able to take care of your staff. You have to make sure that you can't just be paying them well, right? They have to feel like they're safe.
Yeah, that's something I want to touch on. And this is just pure numbers. This is not taking any human aspect into it. So I don't want people to read into this too much and say, "Oh, you're not being considerate of people's lives." I don't want to come across like that. Um, but if we're looking at just a pure numbers situation, okay, I have a total of 4 full-time staff members. If let's just say one got sick and nobody else got sick, the impact on my business as far as cost for just them being out 2 weeks. Let's say they catch it and then we find out nobody else gets sick. They're gone for 2 weeks. They recover perfectly fine. No other issues that could happen outside of that. It's still going to cost me $10,000+ a week, just as a pure revenue number. That's why I'm being cautious, because that risk is not worth it. I mean, you're a business and you have to consider risk when you open a game store.
Right.
You can't, like, obviously, the right thing to do is to take care of your employees. But as, like I said, the personal level, that's taking care of your employees. As a business, you just have to look at numbers, and it makes more sense to make sure your employees feel safe with you and, know you're doing the right thing. Like I've gone to my apartment and I've gone to my store. I have not gone anywhere else at all, basically. I think yesterday I drove out of town to pick up a collection while being distant and wearing a mask and everything. But that's it in the last 6 months.
Yeah, and I think, like, again, that's really the example that you have to set for your employees, right? Because one, you're ultimately, at the end of the day, you're responsible for them. If they get sick at work, right,
Yep.
through a customer interaction, or someone was sick and they came into work, right, that's on you. But like, by setting a good example, right, like,
You do not want to have a friend or employee or somebody die because you got them sick. And as a
absolutely,
business owner, you have to make the proper decision. And if, like, you believe that it can be done safely while being open, that is your decision, and that's fine. As long as you're doing everything you can, that's what we can ask for.
absolutely, absolutely. We've been going on for about an hour now, so I'll keep this last question very, very brief. What
Mhm.
do you think your store will look like for the remainder of 2020? We're about 3 months out, right? Like, what is your just kind of very quick projection, and where do you think you'll be at the end of this?
I'm hoping that I have 3 months left in the year, give or take 3.5 months. I am hoping that I double what I've done already this year based off of the changes and things that I'm doing. And I do want to touch on one other thing, because I do want to keep this brief, is sealed product, because this is part of it too. Magic is going through such cool sealed product stuff right now. It looks so good as far as, like, buying and selling this stuff, and, like, the print runs are probably the same. We don't know for sure, but we do know that product is getting cut, because I think that so many people are actually fully ordering their product, and they can only print it so quick. Like, sealed product is going through their roof right now.
Yep.
It's incredible. I mean, I personally am sitting on about 50 box or 50 VIP packs for double masters that I'll be selling around Christmas time, which I expect them to be about $150 a pack.
Yep.
Um, but, like, at the same time is that, you have to keep in mind that, like you said, there's a pandemic going on, and sealed product, it's like I said, we have more people getting in the game. It's insane, honestly. I cannot buy enough sealed product. um, I cannot stop seeing my store growing unless something major happens outside of it. And it just comes down to buying more cards. If you have money to buy cards, you spend that money on buying cards, because cards are currently going up.
Yeah, I touched on this yesterday briefly, and I think, like, you would touch on it as well. Just, this is, I think, across the board for people, sealed product is hard to buy right now.
Hmm.
Everyone is just being allocated, right? Because
Cut huge. Like, I got cut 60% of what I ordered for double masters, and I put my order in for double masters in March.
yep. And I think, like, the thing that people have to remember is decisions don't happen overnight. The decisions that we're seeing now are likely decisions that Wizards of the Coast, Konami for Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, these are decisions
Hmm.
they made, like, back in March when this first started. Any decision they made back then is something that we're starting to see now. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of them, I touched on this yesterday, a lot of them had made the decision that, the intuitive thing would be pandemic, people are going to be spending less money, game stores, if they have to close, right, we need to print less, we're probably going to be selling less. And if they printed
Hmm.
less, they sold less, there's less at the distributor level, which is what we're seeing. it's when it comes down, the game stores, they're gonna get less in their allocation, even based on how much they ordered. We're seeing this across the board for every single game, right? And then
And,
as
and
it
I also think that they didn't cut production as much as I think they were forced to cut production,
right,
because of what's with the pandemic going on, of course. And I think the print runs are trying to keep them as large as they have been. I just think people are buying more product. Like I think the product's just better as a product. I mean, I'm excited for the D&D set, and I don't play Dungeons and Dragons at all because it's an introductory. Like it looks like a Korea to Godzilla. D&D to deal with magic is going to be big.
yep, yep, I totally agree. So Rusty, thank you for joining us. It's always great to see your insight. I'm sure for everyone out there
Yeah.
listening, I'm sure I'll have Rusty on again in the future. It's always great to talk to people that have similar experiences. Just kind of as people who are looking for more information, how can people find you?
So people can find me on Facebook is the easiest one. My store Next Ridge Games, or I believe you'll have so I don't butcher saying my user handle, etc. You'll have that up afterwards on Facebook or Twitter. So I'm very open with stuff. Actually, like my business card has my actual address, my actual phone number on it, I should say, so that people can reach out to me. And if you reach out to me and have questions, that's totally fine. I'll be as honest as possible. I'll probably be a little bit less professional than I am now. Because I don't really try to make things look pretty. I'm trying to be very blunt and honest with a lot of stuff so that people get a true picture of it. I don't want somebody to get discouraged, but I also don't want somebody to end up losing their life savings or anything else along those lines that makes them, have a bad experience. So I'd rather be a little bit more, blunt on some stuff. But you can reach out to me at any time, and anybody, just ask questions, ask away. That's kind of what I'm here for.
Yeah, so for people who are listening, for people who want to follow up on this, I will follow up with Rusty, get his information. I'll make sure it's posted in the comments below, so that way people can reach out to him as needed. With that said, thank you again. I really do appreciate having you on. We do look forward to hearing from you again. For myself, I'm Edward Nguyen. Thank you all for listening. You guys can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. The information for Vermilion is on the right for people who want to reach out that way. I hope you all stay safe out there, wherever you are in the world. This is Edward Nguyen on behalf of Vermilion, signing off for the weekend. Enjoy yourself, enjoy the sun, enjoy the long Labor Day weekend. I will be back